So Drew Brown, the D in DMV, is sort of famous for saying we have to listen to the land, and you know it can sound a little abstract, you know, when you're talking in those terms, but I think he's totally right. And that, you know, landforms and place and history and culture and heritage play an important role in society. And it's important that we pay attention to what they're telling us. So the White Tank Mountains, you know, they were there long before any one of us. And they have a rich history. And so we're trying to make sure that we understand that history, that we pay attention to it, that we preserve it over the long haul. And we're perpetuating that story for future generations, future residents of Verrado, you know, over time. So the idea of place is really what DMV is all about.
You have a tremendous amount of buildable land surrounding that mountain, some of which is developments have started. This is a gem for the West Valley, and we really want to be able to responsibly, I'd say, protect the environment and the resources, but doing that with everyone who is directly involved, because you've got to have, everybody's got to be in the game in order to really make it work.
The town is 600 square miles, over 600 square miles, so it's really large geographically. It has a lot of great natural resources in the city. You have the White Tank, you have the Gila River, you have the Hassayampa River, you have the Buckeye Hills. So we have a lot of these great natural resources in the city. We feel it's really important to protect those resources so that they're available for future generations. In the White Tank specifically, we were able to get the lease agreement with BLM for the 8,675 acres. And as we were going through that process, we had to conduct the environmental assessment, which helped us identify all those great resources that are in the park. And there's the plant and animal communities that are in there are significant. All the cultural resources that we found and are learning about are very significant to the history of the region and the state. So it's important for us to look at that as holistically and protect it and preserve it.
The White Tank Mountains are a huge asset, as you mentioned, to the West Valley. So part of that is working really collaboratively as a team to protect that area, to preserve that area. So it's there for conservation purposes, it's there for recreation purposes. It is a community asset that then helps further economic development for the region. It's all of those things, but it's going to take really a unified effort to do that. The city of Buckeye is going to have to be involved, the city of Surprise is going to have to be involved, Maricopa County from not only the park perspective, but also the unincorporated areas of Maricopa County that are around there. And pulling all those together, I think, will be a key element of what the Conservancy can really help us achieve.
The challenge is, how do you develop a framework that can interface the urban growth as it happens in a way that doesn't compromise the heritage of these lands, that doesn't compromise the cultural resources that are there, that doesn't compromise the natural resources, and really allows that, I guess, pristine urban wilderness really to exist.
Biological diversity is a critical element to keeping a healthy ecosystem. And so for White Tank Mountains as a whole to keep that biodiversity, I think is critical. And in doing that, we're going to have to maintain linkages to the Hassayampa River, for example, where wildlife can migrate back and forth. I had mentioned earlier that at one point we had identified up to 7 or 8 mountain lions that were roaming the park. You've really never had any issue with that because there's always been a healthy mule deer population in the park. And so it's just a very natural cycle of the mountain lions and the mule deer working together, where we've had really no human encounters with the mountain lions. But my concern is if those mountain lions get cut off, or the diversity of the population of mule deer changes dramatically within a system that's completely cut off, that compromises that whole system.
really since the day we arrived in Verrado, we knew this was coming. We knew from the first time we set foot in Verrado that the White Tank Mountains was kind of like the best kept secret in the valley.
I think the White Tank Mountains are one of the best opportunities for the urban community to interface with the natural world. And I think that's a problem that we have, and a problem that we see all over the Phoenix region, is that our urban communities don't have the opportunities that they really need to connect with the natural landscape. And I think that's the value of the Maricopa County Park System in particular, is that it brings those resources, those natural resources, those experiences to urban communities, because there's a really close proximity between the county parks and these urban areas. But I think the White Tanks in particular are going to be one of the best models for that in 20 years when you have development literally surrounding them, because you're going to have these natural resources right there, and you're going to have opportunities for children, for adults, for retirees to go in and out of this park system and be really close to nature, which is something that, you know, I don't think you have in a lot of places.
You know, our short-term goal is finding opportunity for all of those that have an interest in the conversation to have a seat at the table and to be a part of this early conversation about the idea of the formation of a conservancy for the White Tank Mountains, which doesn't exist. There's a lot of really important efforts taking place in and around the White Tank Mountain region, but there isn't an umbrella organization that is solely responsible for conservation, across all of those efforts.
The potential for population growth within that 600 square miles, it's huge. I think it's important that we conserve them, but also connect them to the community so that they have easy access to get to them. So constructing, trailheads that are close to these master plan communities and these large subdivisions that are in Buckeye, to the Gila River, to the Hacienda, White Tanks, not only connecting to them to the communities, but connecting them to each other through a series of trails throughout the city.
The priority challenges I think the Conservancy should focus on, number one, are building that regional coalition, making sure all the communities are on board. We all understand really the array of values that property has. And then another thing I think is critical in the short term is to get a real good look or inventory of what is out there. Not only within the White Tank Mountain Park, not only within what Buckeye has identified as their regional park, but that whole ecosystem. Because there are some pieces of state trust land around there that we need to be looking at to make sure, are those vital components of a wildlife corridor? Are there archaeological spots in there that we need to be adding to what we have already?
So it's really, it's part of our DNA. It's part of what we do at DMV is stewardship for the land, and we've discovered that, it's almost always a win-win if you can get all the stakeholders to the table and you can talk about conservation in a caring and thoughtful and responsible way that respects, individual landowner property rights and all these other things. You really can have your cake and eat it too. You really can develop and do things responsibly and conserve natural resources at the same time.
Well, they're a finite resource. The water resources that we have in the Gila River and the Hacienda, that's a finite resource. The mountain communities and the plants and animals that are in there, that's a finite resource. So protecting those is really important. If we don't do anything to protect them, what's going to happen to them? When the mountains become developed, when the rivers dry up. So it's really important that we take a look at that, make sure that we are conserving it and protecting it to the best of our ability, and working with the different agencies and different partnerships that we established.
So I think they go hand in hand. I don't see any opposition, any confrontation in any way. I think it's about making sure everyone's getting value out of the relationship. And I think that's the vision that everyone involved in the White Tank Conservancy has.
I think this is a great timing to do this. This is probably, we don't have the pressure of a push on development, and the market's still a little soft, so I think it's timely for us to be in position, and I think it's going to work. I'm just really enthused about the whole process.
So it's really important that we start out by making this a collaborative process, and we engage everybody that has an interest in this, which is why we're dedicated to a long-term planning. You know, we're not going to just, you know, decide to do this and, you know, go down to and get our 501c3 and just, you know, hang our shingle and say, okay, we're now the Conservancy. We want, you know, to sort of join forces with everyone that has an interest in the topic to help in the creation of this.